I didn't have any gurus. I didn't have any teachers. Those 13 years where I was studying everything that was basically dualistic and path oriented, um, didn't serve any good really in the end. but after realization, at that point, I was just talking from my own experience and then delving deeper into my own understanding. So I would say, yeah, I'm one of those that did not have a guru. So, when people go, "Are gurus required?" And I go, I would say no in my own experience.
No.
But if somebody goes, "Well, then our guru is needed," and I'm like, "Well, it could have helped." you know, it could have helped. The if the best of the gurus were one of them was available, it could have helped because I'm sure I hit you know pitfalls and brambles where I could have avoided those if there was a guru that goes, you don't want to go that way. Focus over here.
Yeah.
That's because I mean that's what Ramana Maharshi did is he just tried to keep
Ramana.
people on. Ramana was like, stay on the path, stay focused, don't get distracted.
Welcome to Silence 80 Speak, the podcast where timeless wisdom meets the present moment. I'm your host, Sukhdev Virdee, and in each episode, we delve into the profound teachings of non dual masters, those who have transcended the boundaries of duality and revealed the simplicity of existence. Join us on this journey beyond words as we explore the essence of being with those who have realized the truth that goes beyond language, beyond thought. Open your mind, silence your chatter, and let the wisdom of silent sages resonate within you. Today, my guest is from Petersburg in Florida. He's a writer and a speaker about non duality and enjoys speaking about related topics of being present, self inquiry, and the end of suffering, silence of mind, stillness, love, truth, and harmony. He is known for his down to earth and straightforward style for making non duality simplified. I'd like to welcome to the show Eric Putkonen. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, want to thank you so much for taking out the time for being on this. I've been following you on YouTube. I love the way you speak so candidly and so spontaneously, and you share your experiences. And I thought I must get you after I learned that you have studied so much in terms of non-duality and the scriptures and the other traditions that talk about non-duality as well. Eric, tell me. Um, Number one, you said I know you migrated to Florida. Your family migrated there. Where did they come
Oh,
from?
well, no, I mean, I originally was born and raised in Minnesota, and so I
Oh,
grew up in northern Minnesota. Um, you know, grandfather, everything there. My last name Putkonen actually is from Finland, so it's like my great grandfather immigrated from Finland, came to Minnesota. We've been there for a couple generations. I grew up in Minnesota, but even as a resident, it's that's always lived in Minnesota. It's too cold, and so I moved to St. Petersburg, Florida, 5 years ago. So I uh, I like it warmer.
all right, great, great. So, tell me, how did you was spirituality always there since childhood, or how did you get into spirituality, and how did you finally come into non-duality?
Okay. Well, in northern Minnesota, religion in particular is kind of a private matter. What wasn't really spoken of. And I was raised in a non-religious household. So I mean, my dad had the opinion of me and my sister will figure it out when we're older. And so I never went to church, wasn't raised in any background. But from an early age, I had a deep curiosity about the world and reality, and always felt there was something more to it. And so even as a youngster, I studied unusual, interesting topics: UFOs, ESP, you name it. My English, school papers were always on interesting topics. But when I got in my teens, I met somebody who was a little older than me, but he was into spirituality. And he loaned me an autobiography by Paramahansa Yogananda, and that kind of kicked off the spiritual search for me. So that was back in 1990.
Oh, wow.
I was 16 in 1990. So that's when the spiritual search started. And I became kind of a ravenous reader and student of everything. So I mean, I read everything. I mean, it was Kabbalah and mysticism of different kinds. And funny enough, I read nothing about non-duality. That topic escaped me for somehow. But I studied a lot of stuff about various traditions. I'm probably fairly well read and broad knowledge of spirituality. Um, and I was like that for about 13 years. And eventually I kind of hit this wall where it seemed like any new book I picked up seemed to be like just another version of a book I'd already read. And so I hit this point where I just felt there was nothing else to find in the books. And so basically at that point it was more of the futility of it hit me. So I gave up the spiritual search. And so I actually stopped dead. I quit meditating. I quit all spiritual practices. I didn't do anything for a year and a half. And then in a weird way, Eckhart Tolle's name kept popping up in conversation. And I know enough about synchronicities where it's like, things start popping up repeatedly. It's something to pay attention to. And
Right.
so after his name popped up about a half dozen times in a week, I'm like, okay, I get the picture. I need to read something on this. And but I loathed the idea of reading another spiritual book. So actually I decided to take the shortcut and went to the public library to see if there's any videos by him. And sure enough, there was one. And
Okay.
so I watched a 2.5, 3 hour lecture that he did, and I think it was the late 80s, you know. And in the course of the video, he talked about a lot of things I thought already knew, being present, things like that. That was part of the problem. I thought I was being present, but you can't think yourself present. So and so if anything, the one thing the video did give me was kind of the exercises of inhabiting the body, where instead of being totally focused outward, you turn some of the attention inward, and so you're kind of aware of both inside and outside simultaneously. And when I did that, it kind of ate up the bandwidth of my attention, so it didn't leave a lot of room for thought, and I found thought died down to nothing. Now, I will preface that this was not the first time I've been totally present. We all experience moments of presence where there's no thought, be it awe, surprise, a spontaneous mystical experience. Who knows? There's always moments in our lives where we're present, and so this wasn't the first time, but you could say the fruit was ripe at that time, I guess. But I was deeply present, and things clicked. It was like, oh, I now get what I've been, kind of sensing or striving through all this study. And and I was kind of blown away by just the nature of reality. I mean, it was a non-dual realization. So it was that there is no other, and the whole idea of a me is made up. There is no me. And so now in the course of the video, um, Eckhart Tolle also mentioned Ramana Maharshi. And so I went, with this new realization, hey, let's go read some Ramana Maharshi. And so I started reading works. A lot of his basically talks were transcribed, and I found it just resonated deeply with the new revelation or realization that I had. I'm like, yep, this is it. This is what I realized, and that started kind of a brief study in non-duality because I was kind of curious what everybody else said. So I started reading a little Nisargadatta Maharaj, Ramesh Balsekar, H. Punja, some modern Westerners, Gangaji, Adyashanti, others. And after, I don't know, probably 6 to 10 different people, I kind of got the sense we're all talking about the same thing, and I was kind of intrigued by the different ways that, people use different words to point at it, but it was more or less the same thing. But what struck me though was I loved Ramana Maharshi the most because he was so laser focused. I mean, you get into some of these books and they meander to other topics and they kind of get off point, and Ramana would never let that happen. I mean, it's always the self. I mean, people would come to him and go, "Who was I in my last life?" And he'd smile and go, "Who are you now?" He just he wouldn't let you deviate. It was just he wouldn't entertain other things. I found that's why he's to this day he's one of my favorites. But I studied that for a while, and then it was soon after. I think it was probably about 6 months after realization that it just became my favorite topic. It's what I like to talk. It's what I like to think about. It's kind of like what I like to ponder, and so I started talking about it. And actually, I launched a podcast called "Out of Our Minds," which I did, I think, for almost 3 years. It was a 15-minute every other week podcast, and I just whatever topic seemed to come to me, I would talk about it. And but eventually, I hit a point where I didn't have anything else to say, and so that kind of just fizzled out. Um, then a couple more years passed, and that kind of got the itch to start talking about it again. And so then I started a blog, and I blogged for a couple of years where I was just writing about this stuff, and did that for a while, and that kind of fizzled out. But probably my YouTube channel is what I've been doing the longest. That's been going on for over 5 years now. I haven't been
Mm.
posting regularly. I think my last post was over a month ago, so my consistency is falling off. It's one of those things where it's like, it starts feeling like anything you talk about, you've talked about before. It's like, do I talk about this again? I don't know. And so, yeah, if anybody wants to watch my videos and ask questions, it might give me ideas for other videos. But because I do read all my comments, and but yeah, I've been doing those videos now for quite some time. I still like doing. I think I like interviews a lot too because I occasionally do interviews like this. I just like talking with people. It's like,
Yeah.
whether it's podcasting, blogging, or doing the video, I'm just talking. But the interaction and being able to just kind of hang out and talk about it is still my favorite format. And so I occasionally hold, in-person songs at my house, or I might do something online. Nothing consistent, but I'll post it and say, "Hey, let's get together and shoot the breeze about non-duality." So that's kind of how where I came from and how I got here.
Wow, wow, what a journey. What a journey. You've described everything. You've answered all the questions I was going to ask you, and we're done. So,
Oh no, I
ah,
don't want to be done yet. I just got here.
yeah. The way you spoke about Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi is my favorite. I wrote 10 books in 2019, and in every book of them, I have specially like acknowledged him because he's been a big part in my awakening.
Mhm.
Um, why I was laughing when you said he's so laser focused and all that. I remember a story. There's a story about him where you've heard of the god Vishnu. Vishnu.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's a devotee who comes to him and he says, "Look, I don't really understand this non-duality stuff, and I'm not really into intellectual stuff. I'm more of a devotee of Vishnu. And is that okay?" And Ramana says, "Yeah, that's fine." And so he says, "Oh, that's fine. Then after I die, will I go to Vaikuntha, which is the heaven of Vishnu?" And Ramana says, "Yeah, you will." And then he says, "Oh, I will." And when I am in Vaikuntha, now he obviously knows Ramana can see everything and knows everything. And he says, now when I'm in Vaikuntha, um, will Vishnu see me? And Ramana says, yes, he will. And wow, Vishnu will see me in Vaikuntha. Tell me, what will he say to me? And Ramana says, he will tell you, go and find out who am I. He was that direct. Like you said, he would not let you diverge from the self. Or if anybody asked him the question, he would number one would ask tell them, who is it that wants to find out that one first.
Yep.
Yeah. So great. You got all this, you studied all this while you were in America. Did you have any physical gurus? Did you have any other
No,
videos, or just
you know,
from books?
I didn't have any. I didn't have any gurus. I didn't have any teachers. Those 13 years where I was studying everything that was basically dualistic and path oriented, um, didn't serve any good really in the end. But after realization, at that point, I was just talking from my own experience and then delving deeper into my own understanding. So I would say, yeah, I'm one of those that did not have a guru. So, when people go, "Are gurus required?" and I go, I would say no in my own experience.
No.
But if somebody goes, "Well, then our guru is needed," and I'm like, "Well, it could have helped." you know, it could have helped. The if the best of the gurus were one of them was available, it could have helped because I'm sure I hit you know pitfalls and brambles where I could have avoided those if there was a guru that goes, you don't want to go that way, focus over here.
Yeah.
That's because I mean that's what Ramana Maharshi did is he just tried to keep
Ramana.
people on. Ramana was like, stay on the path, stay focused, don't get distracted,
So he would
and
say
that's
God, guru, and the self are one and the same. The
yeah,
guru is actually within you, obviously.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But no, I mean it's and then the books, were at that point when I got into non-duality, the books were just giving me terminology and vernacular to be able to talk about it myself. I wasn't particularly learning anything from them. Um, some of the books I read were more Advaita, some were more Zen, so I got kind of different slants in how people point at things.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, all my writings and videos and stuff, I've always talked from my own experience. I make it a point to try not to refer to other books, teachers, and such, because the point is I'm just talking from my own experience. I'm not parroting.
Right, 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 right. You've got to transcend all those books, and all that knowledge is basically unlearning. It's teaching you that all this is not required. You don't need any knowledge.
Yeah.
It's actually unlearning. It's not really learning. And that's really good that you managed to understand it on your own. Because I studied Advaita extensively, and then I studied a bit of Buddhism. Then I came into Kashmiri Shaivism. So Advaita made everything clear for me because it's completely on every single word, logic. It's basically logic. And
Hmm.
so if you understand every word and the meaning that you're saying, then you would understand Advaita so simple. Like we started off with saying you thought you were in the present moment. And just the terminology, I think I'm being present. Uh, It's a thought. You can't be present when there's a thought. Uh,
Yep.
I never had a guru as well, like a living guru. So Ramana came into my life. That's where I actually understood this because when you're on a path, the guru is also looking for you. The guru finds you if you are on his path. So Ramana came to me in different ways. Um, Tell me, what out of these, all these teachings, all like Zen, you mentioned Advaita, you mentioned Buddhism. Um, the difference, is there any difference between the Buddhist non-duality and Advaita's non-duality and the Zen one and any of these teachers that resonated more with you than the others?
I wouldn't say any of them resonated more. Um, I like both the Zen Buddhist and the Advaita both. I mean, and because they point in different ways. I would not say the non-duality that they're pointing to are different in any way. It's the
Yeah.
same ultimate reality they're pointing at.
Right.
But what it is they're using different terms, different pointers to perhaps get over different obstacles. I mean, this is kind of one of my theories because Advaita. I mean, it predates Buddhism by quite a ways, and so there's always been the idea of self. There's always been the idea of Atman.
Yeah.
And I believe that by the time Buddha came around, he probably saw a lot of widespread attachment to this idea of an everlasting me. I will last forever. And so all he did is he goes, well, I'm going to teach Anatman. There's no self.
Yeah.
Now, if you really look at what the Buddha said, is he didn't say there was. I mean, yeah, if you just look at the words, there's no Atman. Yeah. But when he talked about it, is he said there's no everlasting me. There is no me that will last forever. Don't seek a me that will stay here. There's no permanent me. And if anything, that resonates so closely to the true Advaita Vedanta teachings that it's just a kind of a slant off of it to clarify a point.
Yeah.
You can imagine at the time, if you see a bunch of people really, really attached to the idea of an everlasting me because they're misunderstanding what Atman is being pointed at in Advaita Vedanta, then having a teacher come along and say, there is no me, there's no permanent me, there's no me at all, forget about it, it's kind of revolutionary. But now, centuries later, you have people who don't really understand the other side, and so the two argue against each other. Well, they say there's no self, and I say there is self, and one of us has got to be wrong. And I'm like, no, you're both saying the same thing if you really delve deep enough. You're looking at it too superficially to see the commonality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the way I find the Buddhist approach in Advaita is they're just covering things from a very different point of view, but they're pointing at the exact same thing. I mean, it's in that way. For me, I find the two connect very well together, but some people, they're more drawn to one side or the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Advaita aren't the only paths because Taoism is actually got some very extreme non-dualism ingrained.
Right.
The Sufis of the Muslims,
Ah.
very non-dual.
Yeah.
It,
Absolutely.
the mystics of the world over have taught
All non-dual.
non-duality in one form or
Wow.
another.
Yeah.
And they all use the nomenclature of the people that are in their traditions. And so, when the Sufis are talking about non-duality, they're usually talking about unity because that resonates with Allah and their teachings. When you start talking to Christian mystics about non-duality, they use a slightly different word for non-duality, but it's the same basic idea. And so I think, it's kind of the old Zen problem where they talk about the fingers pointing at the moon and everybody's focused on the fingers instead of the moon. It's like, there's all these fingers pointing at the fingers don't matter. The terms being used do not matter.
Yeah.
If
Right.
you need to see what's being pointed at, that's the point.
Yeah. I completely get that. That's once you are it, then you talk directly from experience. And I enjoy this now. The reason for me doing this is to listen about the same thing from different people in different ways. It's just the same one little thing, but everyone's got their own different ways of talking about it. And when I started off as a devotee of Krishna, and then I had some non-dual experiences which threw me into Advaita, and then I went on to author some books. And when I was studying Advaita, you mentioned the book Autobiography of a Yogi. And that was one of the biggest books in spirituality, it still is right now. And I ordered one of those when I was studying Advaita. And I could not read a page of that book because every page I turned, this miracle, that miracle, this Swami, that Swami, he's got this powers and that powers. And Advaita was completely teaching the opposite. They don't matter. Any experience you have, any power you have does not matter. That's not the truth. And I just could not go through that book. And then Eckhart Tolle as well, like you said, I ordered the book. I could not read the book. And there came a time when I had to stop reading everything because I was done. My final book that I wrote was The Power of Nothing. I said, I'm done. I have nothing more to say. I'm done. Tell me about the podcasts that you did, and you write for some magazines. And go
I
ahead.
have in the past. I
You
have
were
in the
gonna say
past.
something. You were gonna say something.
Yeah,
Don't
well,
let me
I was going to
interrupt
say
you.
there is an interesting story because Paramahansa Yogananda was very much a devotee. He was like Ramakrishna that way. It was almost an avoidance of non-duality because he wanted to be a devotee so much. That's kind of
Yeah,
Paramahansa Yogananda's path.
yeah,
But he did have some understanding of it because there is a story of a man that went to see him once who went to Paramahansa Yogananda, talked to him, and then Yogananda said, "No, you should go see Ramana Maharshi," and he would refer him back. So I mean, he understood there was paths involved, and that person ended up being Robert Adams, which was a guy who talked a lot
yeah,
about non-duality in the U.S.
yeah,
But yeah, he went to Paramahansa Yogananda, and he's like, "No, you should talk to Ramana Maharshi. That's more your path." But Paramahansa, great yogi,
yeah,
deep devotee, and like a I'm an avatar of love practically. The guy, I give him props. He was really good, but he did not understand non-duality because even his conversation with Ramana Maharshi, Ramana tried to point things out. It didn't work for him because there was a conversation between Ramana Maharshi and Paramahansa Yogananda where they were talking about suffering.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And he's and Ramana's like, who's suffering? Paramahansa Yogananda's
Yes.
kind of he was confused by that. So I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody's got to teach from their own point of view.
Yeah.
But I think once you realize non-duality, that the understanding tends to be the same. I mean, even Ramakrishna, who taught Vivekananda and started the Vedanta Society, which is fairly non-dual. Ramakrishna was very much a devotee, but he even had a non-dual realization he couldn't deny, and in the end, he started teaching non-duality. So when you kind of realize non-duality, you're kind of stuck with it.
You can't undo it. You can't undo it. There
Once
is no
you
way.
can't unsee what you saw.
Yeah, coming to that, tell me, do you remember the realization moment, or what happened, what made a shift within you, and how did life change after that, if it did?
Well, like I
I'm
said, I
curious
mean,
about
I was just in my living room on a weekend, and things just clicked in place. While I was watching this Eckhart Tolle video. When I was being very present, and but I mean, I went back to work on that Monday. But I mean, what changed, I would say, is I noticed there was a um, kind of a cessation of thought died down quite a bit. I would say, even after being, when I was finally deeply present again and the realization happened, thought didn't really start up again because the illusion of me shattered and the me couldn't be believed. And probably 80 more than 80% of our thought is all about a me, and so when you don't believe it, those thoughts kind of die away. And so I found after realization, thought died away by and large, and it's actually gotten quieter in my head over the last 18 years. But there's a silence of mind, but also I would say a cessation of suffering, which is why I like Buddhism when he was so focused on the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering, and suffering can end. And I think that is kind of one of the major points of realization is there is this cessation of suffering. So, and I find it's probably one of the most obvious indicators. And so when people go, well, how will I know when I'm enlightened? And I go, when you see suffering regularly, when the chronic suffering dies away, you're probably there. because as long as the me is believed, there's going to be
Yeah.
chronic suffering.
Yeah.
And when you don't believe the me, the chronic suffering falls away. It's kind of it all goes together. But those are probably the two biggest things I've noticed, is just a cessation of suffering and a silence of mind. Um, you know, there was also, the feeling of lack or incompleteness was gone. So there wasn't a feeling of I need anything else. The needing anything else fell away. And so I would say, I've been content since. I really haven't had any major needs or wants or, fears or worries. I mean, it
Yeah.
was actually kind of funny because, I mean, through 2008 during the Great Recession, people are freaking out, and I was pretty mellow, and people are like, "How are you so mellow?" I'm like, "Things will work out. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say, there tends to be this. It makes you more resilient. You can put up with you can kind of go with the you know the tide, so to speak, of the way the world works. Because it's a
Yeah.
constant cycle. It's a roller coaster ride, and you're going with it. It's like you're not fighting it anymore.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I
You,
found that over time, I've actually been, over time, as understanding deepens, I try to get a little more in harmony with things. It's like I tend to watch to see when I'm resisting or fighting anything. It's
okay.
like, because I know that's the beginning of basically just fighting myself. So, I'm harmony has become a very big thing for me. Um, Actually, during my spiritual search and all those years of study, I had I had a book where I took down notes, but I had this list of, I guess it was things I thought that were typically taught in various spiritual traditions. And over the years, this list expanded, and I kept condensing it and trying to liquidate all of what was being pointed at in the simple terms. And I kind of found that in the end, it all comes down to love, truth, harmony, and unity. And not all religions point all aspects equally. Some focus on one or the other, but in the end, they're all kind of pointing at love, truth, harmony, and unity. And I would say after realization, it's been an ever kind of deepening in that. Can I deepen and live more fully love? Can I live and deepen truth? Can I live and deepen harmony? And that's kind of been the focus these days.
Wow.
Because I would say after awakening, it's not like you can't do anything and everything's absolutely complete. There's always a potential of deepening of understanding. And for me, instead of being in I guess, a neutral state, because I think a lot of non-dual people, there's this potential, which I think is a trap, to fall in this kind of almost neutral, apathetic state. you know, that everything's neutral. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just meh.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and yeah, you do overcome suffering in that, being like that, but it's not as fun. And so part of, and so part of what I play with these days also is just what increases joy, what increases awe. These are powerful forces in our lives.
Yeah.
And so, I found that for increasing joy, actively actively appreciating the things around you helps a great deal in increasing joy. And and then in a way, it's almost like sliding along a continuum, because from joy you can almost slide into awe, which is almost a more transcendental kind of feeling. You know, because there's joy, but then there's this. I guess a scale is the best way to put into it. The grandeur of what's
Yeah.
going on hits you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can kind of slide into awe.
Right.
And so I kind of find I like trying to make joy and awe more conducive. And it's like, what can I do to kind of grease the wheels in that direction?
All right. All right. That's
And so
good.
I think that's kind of one of the reasons why um, some people go, yeah, you seem to be such a happy guy. And I'm like, part of it is I'm actively trying to increase my own joy in life.
Wow. I love the way you put that love, truth, and harmony.
Yeah.
Unknowingly, you've just covered the three yogas, the main yogas of Hinduism: Bhakti
Yep.
Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga. And
Yep.
I came down to that as well. When I studied it, I ended up finding out all these paths are coming to the same thing. But then, why? What is the difference between them? So, Bhakti Yoga is all about love, unconditional love. It's emotion. And then you come to Jnana Yoga, it's about truth. You can't have truth in religion. You can have love for God. You can't know the truth about God, but you can know the truth about yourself, or what you are or you're not. And then
Yep.
you come down to harmony, or serving the universe. When there is no me left, then what is this one gonna do apart from wanting to experience everything that there is in the universe? It's like you're in Disneyland and there's good and bad, and it's not real, and you want to experience all of it. So you want
And
to,
the reason why they say all three paths lead to non-duality, because some people are a little confused by that. They're like, well, how do they all lead to non-duality? And I'm like, well, if you look at it, the power of love, what does it do? It brings things together into unity. What
yeah.
does truth do? Well, truth is singular. So as people discover the truth, it brings points of view into unity. What does harmony do? Well, if you're a band and they're in harmony, they sound like one thing. If they're in disharmony, they don't sound like one thing. So it's like love, truth, and harmony all are unitive
Wow.
forces. They bring things together.
That's beautiful. I do this in my so I used to do some 2 day workshops on non-duality, and I used to talk about these three paths, and I would explain what the devotee does, what the jnani does, and what the karma yogi does, what the raja yogi does, and I would go, for the devotee, what is higher than God? Nothing. For the jnani, what is higher than the truth? Nothing. For the karma yogi, what is higher than serving the universe? Nothing. For the Raja Yogi, the meditating guy, what is higher than life itself? Nothing. What is this nothing that all of them are talking about?
You are that
They're
nothing.
all talking about that nothing. Nobody pays attention to that. You go and say, who's higher than God? No one, nothing. Oh, so there is that which is higher than God, which is nothing. Yeah. So let's inquire into that, because it
I
is.
think I can't remember if it was a yogi or Sufi story, but there's a sage that basically went to a king that had a similar conversation where he's like, "What's greater than this? Nothing. What's greater than king? Nothing."
Ah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
he's like, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I am that nothing."
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Eric, I went through a few of your videos on YouTube. I picked up
Yeah.
some great titles. I loved number one. What is it's the title of the video? What is non-duality? Let's start with duality. Now, I'm just now posing some questions which somebody on the path would maybe gain some insights from. So, obviously, non-duality cannot be known. So, the obvious thing is to start with what can be known, duality. When we talk about unlearning, I also teach this, or I tell people that if somebody tells you it can't be known, that means he knows that it can't be known. So, don't ask about it. Ask him how he knows it cannot be known. So your
Yeah.
title is great. What is non-duality? Let's start with what is duality, because if we know what duality is, then we can, what is left over would be non-duality.
Well, the thing is I've always said that, because some people have this idea that non-duality is something else. It's out there, and I've always said, no, no, you don't understand. What is right now is already non-dual. This is it. This is non-duality. But in order to, but they go, well, how is that? And then they point at all the separate things. I'm like, well, that's why I tend to define it in terms of duality. Cause I'm like, well, now you got to talk about what those separate things are. And I go, those are just concepts and beliefs. Those aren't actually separate things. You just believe them to be separate things. Because there's a big forest in Utah called the Pando, and I usually use this for an example too for this because you know it's a fairly recent discovery. So let's go back, before the discovery. Before the discovery, everybody would look at this forest, acres and acres of aspen trees, and you go, how many trees do you see? Oh, there's thousands, tens of thousands. It's just acres. Well, science has now done enough investigation. They found out it's a single root structure. It's a clonal colony. All the trees are like branches off of a single tree. It's one tree,
Wow.
acres of it.
Wow.
But because of the way we presume and take what we see as truth, we see separate trees. Well, this one's tall, this one's short, this one's healthy, this one's diseased, this one maybe has burn scars. These are all different trees. No, it's one tree. It's you don't see the unifying factor, which is the entire root structure. That's one tree.
Wow.
And so usually when I talk about non-duality, I go, well, let's first talk about duality. That duality doesn't exist. Duality fundamentally is just a thought in our head. And in reality, it's all one, and it's always been just one. So
Okay, yeah. From Advaita, wow, I explained it to the people around. So if you're seeing a million separate things, uh, then they're all separated in, if you've studied Vedanta, they're very clear in what the universe is. Simply objects in time and space. So everything is a thing in a particular place and a particular time. Uh, if you're looking with your eyes or you're perceiving with your body, then perceive existence. Look around you and see if you can see something that is not in existence. And that
yeah.
one existence around you is unbroken and that has no
Well,
beginning,
well,
no
actually,
ending.
everything you look around you is also unbroken, because if you really
Yeah.
get down into it, what is everything? It's like everybody's, it's like, yeah, it's not wood, it's not flesh, it's not this. If you keep going deeper, it's like in the end, it's just a sea of energy with very temporary forms.
Yes. Yes.
And the energy itself doesn't change regardless of the form. Forms come, forms go, but energy remains undestroyed.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so, but if you look from the standpoint of energy, as it, from the standpoint of energy, as you look around the world, it's all energy. It's just one thing.
Right.
It's itself. It's like it's all energy. It's just me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, here's a question I would ask to somebody who says that. So, how do I control this energy? If it's all energy, is there a me to control it, or what about the energy in me? And if there is energy in me and outside me, then there's duality. And if it's all energy, then who's in control of this energy?
Well, that gets into a more complex, I would say, kind of analogies and metaphors.
Okay,
Because
you want to talk about it?
if you think about it in terms of when you're dreaming,
Yeah.
when you dream at night, is there anyone else in your dream?
No.
It's just all you.
Right.
It all arose from a single consciousness, you know, the entirety of the dream. Who's in control of everything? Now, as a dream character, when you're and things are happening to you, you're being chased down an alley, you're going, who's in control of all this? You are. You have been in control of everything the entire time. But as the dream character, because the dream character, in order to hold its own integrity as a dream character, it cannot know everything that's going on simultaneously.
Right.
It just like really the right eye cannot know what the left eye really sees. Really it's slightly different. Because if my hand is, over here, I can't see it. you know, it's like each eye really, sees its own thing. We don't realize this because our brain's interpreting both eyes as a single vision.
Yeah.
But each eye sees its own thing. Each being in the dream sees its own thing. That's how it holds its own integrity as a character. But the truth of the matter is, you are controlling the entirety of the dream the entire time. So if you dream you're being chased down an alley by someone, you're chasing yourself. So when because some people, when they get a little, when they talk about, well, if everything's one, why can't I be aware of everything and control everything? I'm like, it doesn't work that way, because the me you're referring to is the dream character, and the dream character is not omnipotent in terms of knows all, sees all. Your
Right.
dream character only knows and sees what these senses are aware of. That's the nature of the body.
Yeah.
But because of that limited perspective of the body, it does not mean you don't control everything. Because some people get really hung up on the idea of control. And I'm like, well, okay, if you take it from a different point of view and say, well, is the body yours? Are you in control of your body? And most people would go, yeah, I'm in control of my body. I'm like, okay, how are you doing with your thyroid gland? Or how about the pineal gland? How about your liver? Appendix, is that going well? I'm not, it's like all these, most of our body, we are not controlling. It's not
Right.
under conscious control, and yet it's happening. and so that's always been my pointer is the dream and our own awareness of our body, because these two examples point to the fundamental flaw of the idea of, well, if this is all one, then I would know all and control all. And I'm like, no, that's under the assumption that conscious awareness would be aware of all and you'd be able to consciously control everything. But conscious awareness, conscious control is of the body mind. And so it's limited to the body mind.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about consciousness, you're talking about not only conscious awareness of body minds, but subconscious awareness, superconscious awareness. All consciousness makes up consciousness. And so, but I would say that consciousness isn't its own point of view. There is no. I would say I'm of the belief that there is no God point of view. It's not like consciousness is aware of all
Oh
beings.
yeah. Of course.
It's more of, that's a fictitious other point of view we like to create because we have a hard time of conceiving anything that doesn't have its own point of view. But if you think about your own body, the body is its own kind of microcosm, and organs are doing its thing, and everything's under control, but it doesn't necessarily need to be under conscious control. And
Right.
there's no thing that needs to be consciously controlling all these things.
Right.
So
Right.
so that question brings up some subtleties. I would say the
Yeah.
subtleties of Advaita.
Yeah.
And for beginners who just encounter Advaita, I must admit, is a common stumbling block where they're confused, because it's like, well, if Advaita is true, then I would be aware of you. And I'm like, nope, that's a premise that is a fallacy. That premise isn't correct. And because, well, it also fundamentally non-duality would, I would say everything is currently already non-duality. It's never been separate. What
It's
is
never.
now is non-duality. And so
Yeah.
anytime you try to say something other than this is what real non-duality is, you've already lost it.
Uh, Tell me, do you ever sit and try to analyze, how did I miss this my entire life? How did I not see it? It was
No,
there.
I think it is very, very understandable misunderstandings. I mean, when infants are born, psychologists will say they have an oceanic feeling. There's no sense of other. There's just this unity. But as we grow, we find out that, hey, I have conscious control of this, but I don't have conscious control of things around me. And so, it creates this question of, well, why can I control this and why can't I control that? And I think it's a very understandable,
Conditioning
misunderstanding to conclude that must be other than me if I can't control it. It's a
would be
very natural
come down
misunderstanding.
to conditioning, how we've been
Yeah.
conditioned.
Well, then as you learn language and concepts, and then you start learning from your parents and teachers, and they're
Yeah.
all referring to you as a separate being, and they're teaching you that everything is separate, and then they have their own reasons of proofs of why things are separate,
Yeah.
and it just becomes a solid thing. So by the time we're an adult, adulthood, we very much believe everything is separate,
Yeah.
but it's all really built on very understandable misconceptions. I mean, I don't think, some people go, why would this happen? Because it's very, very much a logical jump that anyone could make, even though it's wrong. It's,
Yeah.
I control this, I don't control that, therefore we're different. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, it's, I can see this, but I can't see through those eyes over there. They must be someone else's eyes. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so logically, the deduction, I think, is somewhat sound in terms of I can see the misunderstanding. It is, just like if you went to the Pando, which I mentioned, and you see all these various trees and the various conditions, some tall, some short, some disease, some you go there, look at all these various trees. They are separate trees. Yeah, it's a very understandable misconception because that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
That in truth, that's not what it is.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it's a very understandable misconclusion.
Uh, your
Because if you
dream
mow
example.
because if you mow this one down and harvest the wood and remove it, and you go, one tree's been removed. Yeah, you know, it's a very understandable misconclusion.
Here you're actually saying that this is straight away pointing out that you can't take what you see or what you perceive to be real because it could be anything else other than what it seems to be.
Well, I did this in a video once, but I held a loop. It was just it was a 1 inch wide loop of paper. And I said, does this loop, is there an inside and outside? And I was kind of and I sometimes do this in person. I'll walk people through it. And it's like, oh yeah, there's an inside and outside. But in my hand, there's a twist. It's actually a Mobius strip. And so there's actually one surface only. There is no
Yeah.
inside and outside. Both sides is one surface. You can start drawing and you'll make it all the way around to connect, and the line will be on both sides,
Oh,
because it's just one surface.
yeah, yeah,
And so, in a Mobius strip, inside and outside do not apply. There's only one side. And but some people, funny enough, are so conditioned
yeah.
into what they see that even after I point out the loop and the logic and the fact behind this, they'll say, no, there's still an inside and outside of that loop, because they can see the loop. And they go, there's an inside and an outside. And I'm like, yeah, but this twist makes it one side. There is no separate side. And they
Yeah,
can't make the leap because they are
you
so
can't.
fooled by what they see.
Yeah.
But the thing is it's for those that are less conditioned by what they see. They'll see the Mobius strip and they're like, aha, I get it. But the thing is everything's like that. I mean, anytime you see a duality, it comes down to what's the hidden twist? What am I not seeing?
Right, right. I always ask this. I tell people, when people non-dual masters, a lot of people who talk about Advaita and the non-dual teachings. To learn non-duality, you've got to be a good student. You've got to have the right questions to ask. So when somebody says everything's an illusion, everything is not what it seems, the question to ask at that point is not how is it an illusion or how do I believe it's an illusion. The question to ask is if there is an illusion, there must be something real. What is real then? You know, behind it, you can't have an illusion. You can't have an appearance or a dream without a dreamer. You can't have something that's unreal without what is real. So the question that somebody on the path should ask is, if everything is an illusion, forget the illusion. What is real? Because there has to be some reality. Um,
Yeah.
how would you tackle a question like that?
Um, well, I mean, really, it comes down to seeing. I mean, I wouldn't say you need to ignore the illusion, and focus on what's real,
Yeah, yeah,
because it comes down to seeing the false as false. I mean, realization really comes down to seeing this as false. As long as you believe, if you see something and you're like, this is other, as long as you believe that, it's nigh impossible to see through it. Your own beliefs, because the mind is an incredible instrument. The mind tints your perception of reality based on your beliefs and presumptions. You can, if you believe something, there's science backing this. If
yeah,
you believe some stereotype or something is wrong about some product or whatever, the mind will help you highlight everything that proves your own theory to yourself.
right. Yes.
And so it becomes very difficult to see through the illusion as long as you believe it. So I would say no, you need to really look at the illusion, really look at it until you see that no, that's false, that's not reality, that's
Yeah.
and then it starts falling away as you start seeing the false as false. I think that's why so many teachers, Ramana Maharshi and others included, they say seeing the truth isn't the point. It's seeing the false as false. You got to see the false as false first
Right.
in order to be able to allow the truth to come to you.
Yeah. Because the truth is self-revealing. It's not going to be revealed by something. It's
Yeah,
when the false is let gone or it's realized to be false, the truth shines forth on its own. And that's what Ramana used to do all the time. And that's I studied Advaita for about 3 years, and I went through all those the entire process of creation of the universe, space, the five elements, and how the subtle body, causal body, all this, and the organs of uh, locomotion, knowledge, the pancha pranas, and I studied until I came down to the point. I said the root cause of all this is the I thought. If you find out the I thought to be false, everything else will crumble down. If
yeah.
this is not real, everything that this believes or has been through is found to be unreal. And that's what Ramana used to do.
That's
Find
that's
out.
why so many non-duality people focus so much on the I thought and the belief in me, because all the chains that we feel, so to speak, that we're trying to free ourselves from, we try to, yeah, you could try to free yourself from one chain at a time, but you may never get to the end of that. All the chains are being held by a single linchpin, the me. If you can see through that, the rest crumbles.
Right, right, right. And it is a scary realization for some people. When I went through it, at one point it was, my God, my entire life that I have lived, of a pop star, a singer, stage, 20,000 people, stadium full, and I've got all this name and fame. All that is false. All that was just a dream, unreal. For some people, it would be scary to let go of all that. You mean I am not this? I am not what I've been through? Everything I've worked for? How can I let go of that?
No, that was just a very interesting VR character in a game of life.
You look like somebody who plays a lot of video games.
I've played a few in my time.
Okay,
But the thing is I like looking at the world as a game, and
it
really
is.
the advent of VR really does give you insights into the mind and reality quite a bit. Because have you ever played much with VR?
Yeah, when I put it on, it was like, my God, this is confusing the mind completely.
What I find anytime I haven't done it in a while, but when I was playing with VR quite a bit, I notice it doesn't take long for you to forget about the world. And it's like
Right.
this becomes your new reality very quickly. And like I was playing a game where you actually got injured. And it was a little bit of a shock because you'd see this thing hit you, and you're like, and it didn't hurt,
Yeah, of
but it
course.
was still registering as I was hit.
Yeah,
you know, and it's just the world takes on this reality because you just so we so want to just automatically believe the world we see, be it a dream, a VR game, the world around us. We believe it because we see it.
exactly.
and,
Yeah.
and so, but yeah, in the end, the non-dual realization is, yeah, that's a very interesting VR game, but that wasn't you. That's just the character you were playing at the time.
Right, right, right. When I experienced it, I said this is exactly how Maya works. According to Advaita, what Maya is, put on a VR thing, and whatever you're seeing, you now start believing that's what's happening. Until you take it off and say, "Oh, this is real." And then what spiritual awakening is like, "Oh, this is also unreal." Put the
Yeah,
VR of this person out down. Uh,
yeah.
Eric, I went through your website. You've got an amazing website, tons of information for people to, consume over
It's
there. A
it's
lot of
kind of a
content.
repository of all my past work. So yeah, it's got
Yeah,
my blog and my podcast and everything.
I will put the link below the video. But what I found interesting was a PDF that you have written, a small booklet on 52 myths of enlightenment.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
go on.
yeah. I remember writing that. That was something I wrote at one point just because I was online a lot, and I just started accumulating the basic misunderstandings and myths I kept bumping into, going, I should just write a little booklet about covering some of these.
Yeah, there's some questions, some myths that you have put there, which I feel are so important. People do not talk about them. Let me talk about pull out one of them.
Sure.
It says, to say I am enlightened is egoistic. And
Yeah.
yeah, so a lot of
Yeah.
people, even in
I would,
Advaita, they would say that if somebody says I'm enlightened, he's definitely not enlightened. And I
it,
love the way you have explained that. I would love you to talk about that.
well, I would, yeah. I mean, it kind of comes down to a little bit of context, because I wouldn't make that a hard and fast rule. I mean, I was pointing at something, but I know some people like going, oh, yeah, anybody who says they're enlightened, they're not. Well, guess what? I've been saying I've been enlightened for years, because I think it's a point that needs to be made, because I find in this day and age, people are so averse to even admitting it,
Yeah.
or there's so much,
It's like
baggage
taboo.
involved.
It's like
It's
taboo.
taboo. It's
Yeah.
taboo. And so that's one of the things I confront some of the taboos of enlightenment. That's one of them. Is I'll go, yep, realization happened. That was enlightenment for me.
Right.
I can name the date. and they're and they're like, well, that means that's egotistic. And I'm like, no, that isn't necessarily. It can be. And you can, a lot of people can usually tell the difference, I think. But if somebody is identified, if they're invested in some way in the idea of enlightenment, especially as a something that happened in the past, um, you know, then that tends to be a more of a red flag, because as I said it, I mean, even the Buddha said, I'm awake. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, somebody can go, well, that means it was ego. And I'm like, no, it's not ego to state a fact.
Yeah.
It's not ego to say, yeah, I'm awake or I'm enlightened. Technically, that could be just stating a fact that, yes, I recognize this event happened. I recognize I don't suffer anymore. I recognize these things happened. This event, which is oftenly referred to as enlightenment, happened. I admit it.
Yeah.
But that is different than someone who is identified and invested in it, and they're like, no, I'm enlightened. It's like, okay.
I got it. I got it. I know it.
I got it. I know it. I am enlightened. And I'm like, well, maybe. Time will tell. But no, I mean, sometimes people are, if somebody identifies with, now the funny thing is this is related somewhat to just the use of the word I, because some people
Yeah.
in non-duality circles are like, well, they almost make it sound like you shouldn't be using pronouns anymore. You shouldn't use I after you realize, because there's no I.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, language still, the convention of language can still be used. Pronouns can still be used after enlightenment.
Yeah.
But but what I mean by I, when I say I, is different than what most people say when they say I. When somebody says I, they usually refer to me, my identity, who I am. When I say I'm just saying this body mind.
Yeah.
I went to the store. Well, I know I didn't go anywhere. But this body mind went to the store. I went to the store. It's just easier to say that. That's the natural way of using
Amazing.
conventions of language.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
It's
a
so
beautiful saying of how the saints and the sages use the pronoun I. They use it in three different ways. They use it to refer to this person, body and mind, because that is required for transactional purposes in the world. Then they can use it to refer to it as a part of the entire. So there's a story about Hanuman and Rama. I don't know if you've heard. Hanuman is the devotee of Rama, and Rama is God. And
yep.
Rama asks Hanuman, tell me, what do you think of me? I'm God and you're my devotee. What do you think of me? And he says, I, as this, am your devotee and you are my Lord. I, as in the universe, am a part of you. You are the whole and I am a part. But I, as consciousness, existence, or whatever it is, you and I are one and the same. So I am three of them. I can identify with three of them, you
Yep.
know?
It's not so much identifying with them, it's just understanding the
There is
contextual
no
differences.
identity.
It's like, because really, if you're talking about from the version of consciousness, realizing I am that, well, it's kind of an identity. I mean, I've always kind of said any identification is misidentification because I don't even think ultimate reality consciousness can really truly be identified with. But I understand that the scriptures will talk about it in that way, I as in consciousness.
Yeah.
And that would be the true identity. And the other two are just contextual levels of use, not so much an identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's different ways you can use the word. Context is everything. I mean, a lot of times the
Yeah.
context, the same word could be used so many different ways, and the context makes a difference. So if somebody says I'm enlightened, it's like, well, could be a statement of fact, could be egotistic. You got to make this call. Now the other thing is so I is one aspect of the problem, but the other aspect of the problem is enlightened, because when again, context is everything. If somebody says I'm enlightened, they could be referring to just recognizing a past event happened and that they're currently awake. Or they could be actually thinking I'm enlightened as in this past thing this past event happened, and it's not really has anything to do with the now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever met someone like that where they claim to be enlightened, but they talk about it as a past event, but then they go, but I'm still currently suffering everything else. But I was enlightened. I can get it back. That kind of thing. They're using enlightened a different way.
A sad saint is a bad saint.
Well, the thing is you could use the word enlightened different ways, and so
Yeah.
really, because I mean, when I'm saying enlightened, again, conventions of speech, being it's a happening in the past tense would be the correct way of using it, but I'm not talking about it as a past event because enlightenment is an ever-present knowing.
Yeah.
It's like you could say I'm enlightened, but it's an ever-present knowing. So it's hard to capture in words that way.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where somebody goes, "Oh, yeah." So when somebody goes, when somebody says, "What do you? I'm enlightened. What do you think?" And I'm like, that could be taken many different ways. You know.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about
Let's
are
talk
you
about it. What
enlightened?
what do they mean by enlightened? What do they mean by I? Let's work through that.
Because they're all illusions. Whatever will come out of the mouth will be an illusion.
Actually, it is too, because I mean, because it's really funny because because most people have this idea of I am this, I am that. There's this and that object, and so a lot of Advaita and spiritual traditions are telling you not this, not that. So you're cutting off
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
just leaving I am. But then you have some teachers that are really focused. We got to focus on the I am. That's everything. And I find some of the students that follow that get very attached to an I. And so a lot of times I go, no, no, you're at I am now. Cut off the I. Just stay with am.
Yeah.
It's like you're not this, you're not that. Great, you're just I am. Now cut off the I and stick with that part. And that's
That's a
just
nice one.
abiding in stillness.
Uh,
Because I mean,
Eric.
this existence can't be denied, and
Yeah, of
and
course.
and the I then comes in after the fact that says I am.
Yeah.
But if there is no thought, there's just am.
Yeah. Yes. Wow, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Eric, now so we've been almost over an hour. Tell me, you have a lot of students who you do a lot of meetings. You said you do satsangs. You have, I don't know if you're still writing for, you write on Quora, you write for some magazines. I don't know if you're still doing that, but you do have opportunities for people to come and learn from you. How can
Yeah,
people get in touch with you, and what
yeah.
kind of method do you use to teach them?
Um, well, I mean, like you said, I'm pretty active on Quora. Taking a little bit of a break, but I still like Quora, so I'm on there quite a bit. My YouTube videos, like I said, taking a little break on that one too, but I plan on keeping that up. So Quora and YouTube are kind of my staples. Other than that, through my website, there's a one-to-one tab where somebody can fill out the form and ask for a private one-to-one. And so I do those where we'll just get on Zoom and talk. And
Yeah.
it could be about whatever they want to talk about, whether they have questions or they want to get into some aspect of non-duality or, whatever.
Yeah.
But those are probably the three most common ways that I get a hold of people these days. and most of the time when people get a hold of me, they're just they've got questions that they're trying to get through. And so I sometimes point out, maybe questions or things to look into.
Yeah.
Like, I once had somebody come to me online, and they're like, well, I know the teachings, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, but I don't get it. I really am the body. And so I kind of walk them through that a little bit. I'm like, okay, well, let's go under that assumption a little bit. You are the body. Are you all the body? Or are you part of the body? Oh, I'm all the body. I'm like, okay. If you're all the body and you get a haircut or fingernail clipping, have you lost something of yourself? Have you diminished? And they're like, well, no, I'm still me. And I'm like, okay, well, that's two parts you're not. Let's continue. And I just start stripping away parts of the body. And I'm just illustrating a way of inquiry or investigation into themselves. And because, I mean, if you look around enough and see that you're not this, not that, eventually you hit this point where it's like, I can't find myself anywhere in this body,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And and so that, that's one way. So if somebody says, I'm trying to get around this, I try to help them. Some people are like, I'm really stuck on conscious awareness. Is there a way, and I'll maybe try to walk them around some of that. But that's where most of the conversations and teachings are, is just trying to, people will often say, this is the part I'm stuck on, any advice to get around it. And I try to point a way. Not, they sometimes come back, sometimes not, but it's one of those things where you kind of maybe take a couple of nuggets of information and continue on. But yeah, I mean, I would say usually the one-on-one satsangs, they're like an hour long on Zoom. And
All right.
so,
All right.
I've been doing it on a basically donation basis. I haven't set a set fee or anything. So I just tell people, whatever you thought it was worth.
Yeah. 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 I saw that on your website. It mentioned there, pay me whatever you uh,
Yeah.
think it's worth.
But
Um,
it's one of those things where it's not like I'm not a really big name per se, where, it's not Eckhart Tolle or somebody, one of these people where they get constant requests.
yeah.
If
Yeah.
I need to manage my time more, I could see charging money just to keep some people away.
Right. Right. Right.
But at this time, I don't get that many requests. I mean, I get maybe one a week at most, maybe two.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I talk to people here and there, and it's fun. So yeah, if
Oh,
someone wants to talk, I'm available. Other than that, you can catch me in Quora, YouTube.
yeah.
Comment there on my YouTube videos, or ask an interesting non-dual question on Quora.
Do you go by the same name on Quora, Eric?
Yeah, it's usually just Putkonen wherever I go.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I will put all those links below the video. Any new events that you have coming up, or anything in terms of writing or videos or um, satsangs, or anything that is maybe planned for the future in the coming weeks or months? And one more question I wanted to ask you. What
Yeah.
you've been doing it for so many years. What do you think, or what would you analyze, or what would you say is the most common question or the common obstacle that people on the non-dual path face?
Um, well, when it comes to doing stuff, when I'm doing upcoming, I don't really have anything planned per se. I'm actually just looking for more video topics. So, like I said, if somebody wants a video topic covered, mention
Okay.
it on my YouTube channel, and then I'll read it and maybe do a video on that. But I'm kind of stalling on video ideas at the moment. Um, but when it comes to, I would say, biggest obstacle, um, really questioning one's own assumptions and beliefs. So often I would say almost all spiritual seekers, they there's a hesitation, a reluctance to really question one's fundamental beliefs. Because even not, and this happens to varying degrees. I mean, sometimes quite extreme, and other times subtly. But even with the ones, people will come. Sometimes it almost feels like with the intention of, they're looking for confirmation. They're looking for me to tell them what they believe, so they can come back and go, "Oh, I've got it." And that, that's fine, but that it's not about information. It's not about beliefs. It's about an ever-present knowing, like it's, and that is, because knowledge and beliefs are all the past. It's all in the mind. That's all past. The mind can't touch this. And so, accumulating all that only hinders. And so, I would say that's why it becomes the obstacle is not willing to let go of your fundamental beliefs. Because if you have this belief of anything, well, I know this.
Yeah.
Well, now you've cut out the ability to see anything otherwise. And so, really, it's about hitting this, if anything, this point of not knowing. Because some people fear it. They hit this point where they're like, I don't know. I need to know something, but I don't know. And I'm like, no, not knowing is a good place to be, because not knowing, you now have the opportunity to see truth because it's there. You've been looking at it all along. Now that you don't know, you have an opportunity to see it. If you know, you'll just see what you think you know.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
if you don't know, that is good. And so, I would say the obstacle is people's fundamental knowing. Also, I would say a secondary obstacle, kind of related to the first, is their fundamental, almost belief in that they need to do something. Well, I need to do something, to get this. So people are always, it's this never ending cycle of doing and knowing, doing and knowing, doing and knowing.
Yeah.
And they're kind of caught in this treadmill. And those are the two biggest obstacles. You got to cease knowing and cease doing. Just don't know, and just be still, and just look.
Wow, that's beautifully put, beautifully. And for me, there was, we never learned. I studied a lot of motivational stuff before, in my younger years. You have to believe you can do it. You're motivated. Motivation is all about belief. And I didn't know what the word belief means. What does it mean? A belief is a false imagination of something in the future. It's an imagination. It's not true. And the difference between
Could be the
knowing
future.
and believing,
It could be of the future, or the past, or the present.
it's
But a
an
belief, yeah,
imagination.
a belief is a totally imagined thing that you're invested in.
A belief is something that is not real, simple. Just something like fear. Fear is of something that is unknown, which has not happened, and you're fearing something that doesn't exist. These are kind of little things that got to me and made sense. I understood the difference between believing and knowing and doing simple, basic stuff, which we never paid attention to when we were in
Yeah.
school or in
Yeah,
life.
well, that's getting into philosophy, and that's why a lot of times in school they tend to avoid philosophy. But for one who knows, there's no room for belief.
Yeah, yeah. Right, 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 right.
Because they know, and
Yes,
and
yes.
it's this ever present knowing. You don't need to believe in it. It's there.
Uh,
Believing fundamentally means you don't know, and you're
yeah,
just, I'm gonna
exactly.
go. I'm gonna go with this as if I know.
Yeah. And then you come down to the point that you have believed this to be you.
Yeah.
Now that is difficult to understand or for somebody to grasp. Everything else can be a belief, but this I'm believing in. No, I know it. How can you say I believe this to be real? And this is false. It's a tough one. Tell me, Eric. Sorry, we're almost out of time. Um, is there anything that you can think of? This channel is for people who are on the non-dual path. They already. It's not anybody who's new to non-duality. Most of them know what non-duality is, and some of them are looking for answers, nuggets here and there. Is there anything that I may have left out, or you feel that you should share with people on the path, or anything
Um,
else that you would like to add on to?
well, I guess I would just kind of sum my basic teachings, which would, you know, eh, everything usually comes down to two things. I mean, usually I say there's only two things you can do, and the first one's not even a doing. Kind of like Ramana, I'm a big proponent of be still, silent, fully aware, not thinking. Just be still, silent, fully aware, but not thinking about it, just aware. Um, and that's usually my first recommendation. But inevitably, they'll hit this point where it's like, I've been doing a lot of nothing. I feel I must do something. Well, if you if you hit this point of I feel I must do something, then I would say look at this me you feel and think yourself to believe, and keep looking until you clearly see that you're not that. And and it's not a thinking thing. It's almost an experiential, visceral thing. It's like, you need to feel deeply you are not this. You can't just mentally say, "Oh, I realize I'm not that." Well, that's where you get into the difference between head knowledge and like body heart knowledge. It's like they're two different things at times. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I because I know some people will say, "Well, I know I'm not the body," and yet they fear death. And I'm like, well, why do you fear death? That's a that 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 means on a deeper level you do believe you are
Yeah.
this, and you're afraid of it going away. And so, you need to recognize it's not about the head. It's more of a visceral, experiential, seeing you're not that. And so, but those are the only two things you can do: be still, silent, fully aware, not thinking. And when you really must do something, just look at this me. And that's it. Anything else is really more of a distraction. Not that it's totally useless, but it will deviate you from I would say, the quickest path.
Yeah, yeah. All non-dualists will tell you non-duality is the direct path, the fastest, the quickest. In one of your myths, 52 myths, I think there is one question where you say that uh, uh, where is it? Enlightenment is something gained, or there is enlightenment is the end, the finish line. I'm well on my way to waking up. You dismiss all these things. I'll put the
Yeah.
links down for anybody who wants to go on the website. It's a brilliant booklet. I'd really recommend it for anybody on the path. And so anyone who would want to, get more knowledge, get in touch with you. I will put all the links there. Thank you so much, Eric. It's been an honor. I think I'm gonna get you on for after a few more months. It's been an honor. You are such a
Oh,
loving, jolly. I had a blast today. I enjoyed myself.
I
Thank you
enjoyed
so
myself
much.
too. I'd love to come back, but thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.